Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Courtney Yaki, and I'm with the Effingham Regional Growth Alliance, and here today representing the Effingham County Childcare Research Committee. We have an excellent presentation in stored for you this morning. If you could go back one, please. We have an excellent presentation stored for you this morning. Over the last half year, members of the Effingham County Child Care Research Committee, in partnership with Illinois Action for Children, have worked with the consulting group EduDream on a child care feasibility study with the goals of understanding the landscape of child care service availability and emerging trends in Effingham County. And then number two, to be able to quantify the current and future child care needs in Effingham County. And joining us this morning and guiding us through the findings of the study is Monica Martinez, which is the co-founder director for EduDream, and Eliana Whitehouse, which is a research and evaluation associate for EduDream. Now, I think it's important to note that Effingham County is not alone in its struggle to provide adequate childcare for the local workforce. As many are aware, childcare providers have a multifaceted business with unique challenges, and this workforce behind the workforce is an integral component to the economic success of Effingham County. And we tend to use the findings from this feasibility study to provide direction in addressing future challenges of our workforce. Next slide, please. So first, to get started, what is the Effingham County Child Care Research Committee? Well, this is a public committee underneath the county board. It's a 16-member committee. You can see a picture of a few of the members here. It wasn't everybody that was at the last of one of our Indy meetings, but definitely a good broad base of representation throughout the community, where we had business representation, we had civic group representations, we had child care providers, both in-house and through the facilities that represented it, and then had representation from public government as well. So the purpose of the committee was to research and identify underlying issues in childcare services in Effingham County, develop a plan to overcome these workforce-related hurdles, and work with the county board on implementation. And effectively, this was an extension of the community-based planning group. And through the workings for this committee and working with the Effingham County board, we have developed and launched 3 different programs. We launched a child care scholarship program, child care stabilization grant program, and an increased capacity program. In addition to these 3 programs, we also work with the county board in providing support to the Village of Diedrich to assist in developing the child care component of the new Wright Family Center. Now, moving forward, we'll continue to be engaged with the county board in the administration of the 2 programs that are currently open, which is the Child Care Scholarship Program, the Increased Capacity Program, but simultaneously starting to transition to the PAVE Child Care Action Team, which was developed through the community mapping process that Effingham County as a whole went through last year, and effectively transferring from a public board to a public-private partnership in addressing these childcare issues and challenges that our communities face. Next slide, please. But to get us started today and why we're here today, and very excited, is the reporting the findings from our childcare feasibility study. And joining us today, we have Monica and Eliana. Monica works with education organizations to turn data into actionable information that directs strategic, programming, and policy decisions. She is well-versed in research methodologies from 15+ years of applied research experience. Her cross-cutting professional experience includes working for non-for-profits, the City of New York as a direct administrator, and a strategist for a collective impact backbone organization. At EduDream, Monica oversees the data strategy portfolio, which includes supporting organizations in transforming their use of data to drive impact. Monica also has substantial experience providing robust but realistic technical assistance to organizational leaders and practitioners that build data use capacity to guide continuous learning and improvement. She is a 2013 alumnus of Harvard University's Strategic Data Project Fellowship. Monica earned an MPA from New York University's Wagner School of Public Service and has a Bachelor of Arts in Public Policy from the University of Chicago. She is also fluent in writing and conversational Spanish. And then her colleague today, Eliana, supports EduDream's research and education services as a research and evaluation associate. Sorry about that. Eliana is a macro social worker with experience in supporting community-based initiatives and research throughout the lifespan. Prior to EduDream, she worked in areas including child and adolescent mental health, healthy and equitable aging, voting access, and civic participation. As a young learner, she attended a mix of public, private, and alternative learning institutions in the Chicago area, which led to her belief that when fostered by innovation and adaptive learning environments, children from all backgrounds can achieve their full learning potential. Eliana earned a MSW with a focus in policy and political social work from the University of Michigan, where her community work and research focused on the interplay of social determinants of health and policy on equitable aging outcomes. She also holds a BA in psychology and studio arts from Lawrence University. And we are very pleased to have these ladies with us today. It's been a joy in working with them over the last half year on this childcare feasibility study. They definitely, when presented with a challenge, take the bull by the horns and moves forward and allows us to overcome a lot of the hurdles that we experience in gathering this data and putting everything together. And we're excited to bring the reportings to the community today. Do want to note before we get started, this is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be sent out to everybody that registered, and we'll send out a copy of the slides for the presentations today as well. And then in addition, they put a report together on this feasibility study that outlines the high points, and we'll provide that as well. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll save the questions to the end, but with further ado, Monica, are you prepared?
Well, thank you for joining us. And let's jump in. And thank you for the introduction, Courtney. As you mentioned, EduDream, we are a Latina-founded, women-owned education research and consulting firm, inspiring transformation by bridging community voice and rigorous research. We live into our mission by partnering with organizations such as the Effingham Regional Alliance, on a range of services, including actionable research and data strategy. Courtney highlighted the goals of our project together, which are listed here. And these were guided by 3 overarching research questions, which you see here. We really wanted to understand current availability of early childhood care and education services in Effingham County, historical trends, and projected future demand. The research questions guided our data sourcing and analysis, as well as our methodology, which you see highlighted here. We took a systematic approach to answering the questions, starting with identifying over 20 data sources in partnership with the Effingham team. We gathered publicly available data, analyzed the data, and developed insights, which we are excited to share with you all today. The data sources included a range of federal and state public data sets, including the census, the Department of Labor, as well as the Illinois Early Childhood Asset Map. And here we have a bit more detail about those data sources. As you can see, data sits in various agencies. It's not all collected annually, and it's not always publicly accessible. We did have to submit a few data requests to some of the agencies for a bit more granular data. We would be remiss without highlighting a few of the limitations that we encountered in our study, particularly around data availability and reporting. As you all may be aware, the census data is a sample data set, so that data is essentially estimates. And then the most recently publicly available child care provider data is through fiscal year 2022, which is from July 1st to June 30th. Another limitation is that child care centers do not necessarily report all of their sessions or age range capacities. And as such, some of our estimates around access rates are likely underreported. And finally, we used a simple methodology to estimate future demand for childcare. As we know, this is very complex. There's many factors that influence demand. And so we decided on a simple methodology. So our team began by examining the demographic and socioeconomic trends in the county to try to really understand the potential need for childcare. And the county, to start, the county population has been slightly decreasing over the last decade. It's currently at 34,500 residents. Projections from the Illinois Department of Public Health indicate that the population will continue to decline through 2025. Residents 55 and older make up the largest share of the county population, and this older age group will continue to grow according to projections. And there are about 2,600 children ages 5 and under in the county. This represents about 7.6% of the total population. The chart on the bottom highlights the growth across the communities and cities in the county. And we see here that the city of Detroit has seen the most growth in the child population, with nearly 300 children residing in the community as of 2020. Median family income in the county has grown nearly 30% since 2011. And during that same time frame, the percent of families whose incomes fall below the federal poverty level has fluctuated over time from around 6% to about 9%. Children experiencing poverty, defined as living under 185% of that federal poverty level, has also fluctuated over time from a low of about 770 children 10 years ago to a high of 985 in 2017. Our best estimate of the number of children in the county who fall under 225% of that federal poverty level is around 37%. And this 225% is the threshold for the Child Care Assistance Program, which we will get into in a bit. The three largest industries in the county are healthcare and social assistance, manufacturing, and retail trade. And according to recent analysis from the Alliance, jobs in the county are expected to increase by 2025. During the workdays, the population of Effingham County grows significantly. From 2010 to 2019, net commuters into the county increased by 58%. And Effingham City in particular attracts the most workers who live outside the county. And we recognize that these trends are pre-pandemic. So the most recent data we have is through 2019. However, we can assume these patterns remain just given the heavy reliance on essential workers, as was noted earlier. And we highlight these commuting patterns because they're particularly important when considering potential demand for childcare, which we'll discuss in a bit. Census data shows a severe downward trend in the ability of women in the county to participate in the workforce. And the visual here highlights the labor force participation rate of women with children under 6. And we see that it has decreased from a high of 87% in 2015 to a low of 70%, which is the data we have most recently in 2021. We took a look at these labor force participation rates in the surrounding counties, and we found that during the same time period, in the surrounding counties, that includes Clay, Cumberland, Fayette, Jasper, the labor force participation rate increased for women with children. So Effingham County is unique and has the lowest labor force participation rate of the surrounding counties. And census data also shows the high proportion of working parents in the county. The chart here highlights the number of children under 6 by working family condition. And the dark blue represents children with all of the parents working. That's defined either 2 parents in the labor force for those that are in 2-parent households, or 1 parent in the labor force for single parent households. And we see that over the last 10 years, the number of children with 1 working parent has increased, while the number of children with all of their parents working has decreased. So this really suggests that parents are leaving the workforce, especially women with children under 6, as we noted before. So our second research question examined the shifts that have occurred in childcare services in the county over the last 5 to 10 years. And we will be sharing these key terms and definitions after the webinar, but we just want to highlight that there are a range of programs and services available for children and families. They're delivered in a variety of settings, including licensed daycare centers, family care homes, as well as schools. And when we reference childcare capacity, we're referring to the number of childcare slots that are offered at childcare providers. And here we highlight several programs and services according to the ages of the children served. So we did examine early childhood care availability from fiscal year 2012 to fiscal year 2022, which is 10 years and the most recent data we have available. And we did find that the overall capacity at licensed childcare centers in Effingham County has fluctuated over the years. It was a high of about 833 in 2012. And during the same time frame, the capacity at licensed family care homes, represented by the baby blue bars, has decreased by 45%. So, in 10 years ago, there were 65 family home care providers offering care. And 10 years later, there are just 31. So this has been a decrease of more than 50%. And this really does have implications for working families, since in-home family childcare may offer more flexible hours. They have sometimes evening and weekend care compared to center-based settings. Over the past 10 years, we also see that Teotopolis has seen the greatest decline in licensed childcare availability. We do know there's a new Topmate Central facility that opened this past fall, so that will help address the recent closures. And earlier, we highlighted the rapid growth of the child population in Dietrich, but as of fiscal year 2022, the city is a childcare desert, meaning there are no childcare providers. However, we do know there's a new Wright Family Center that's currently under construction, and that will bring about 50 much needed childcare slots to the community. And childcare centers report their capacities by individual sessions, either part-time or full-time, and the ages of the children served. And for centers that serve children ages 3 to 5, we see that the overall session capacity dropped considerably in 2020, which we know is at the height of the pandemic. And the chart on the right-hand side highlights this drop. Historically, there were about 200 part-time sessions available for this age group. And we see that has dropped considerably in most recent years. For centers that serve infants and toddlers, which is a chart on the left, we see that the capacity has increased. It's more than doubled from historical trends. And for care provided in family child care homes, we see that capacity drop significantly since 2013. This decrease has been primarily due to a loss of slots for the older children ages 3 to 5, as shown on the chart on the right. Here we highlight trends in capacity for federally funded programs. This includes prevention initiative, early Head Start. For children ages 3 to 5, we see there are larger gaps in capacity for eligible children compared to infants and toddlers, which is a chart on the left. Regardless, all age groups, there is a gap in terms of eligible children and slots that are available. We mentioned a bit earlier that children from households with incomes less than 225% of the federal poverty level are eligible to receive the Child Care Assistance Program, which is CCAP, through subsidies. And these subsidies do help families pay for care in center-based or home-based settings, and families share the cost based on a sliding scale, and that's based on the family size as well as income. So based on our analysis, we see that the number of children who are eligible for the subsidy has grown over the years, with the highest in 2019. That's when the eligibility increases, so it makes sense that we see that increase. However, the percent of children who actually receive the subsidy has decreased quite a bit, from 30% in 2011 to just 11% in 2021. So there are a number of factors that could explain this trend. For one, we started to see a decline in percent of children who actually receive the subsidy, and starting in 2015. For those that may not know, that's the year then Governor Rauner restricted income requirements for this program due to the state budget impasse. And so even though that change only lasted a few months, some have cited that this led to a decrease in parents' trust in the system as recently as 2019. And as, again, childcare prices have increased, we'll show that in a bit. The reimbursement rates for providers have not, and providers who need to charge more, a larger amount, often turn down families or charge parents the difference. So there's a range of factors, paperwork requirements, families may not be aware of the program. So we just want to highlight what we feel and we think based on what we know may be happening here. And moving us along here to understand childcare access and gaps, we looked at a range of measures, including the supply, the demand, and the access rate, which we define as the total number of slots that are available per 100 children living in the county. And we see that of the roughly 2,600 children between the ages of birth to age 5 who are living in the county, childcare providers offered about 1,168 slots to these children, and that translates to 44 slots for every 100 children, or an access rate of 44%. And these rates have fluctuated over time, which we highlight on this graph. And countywide, the effective childcare children per slot ratio is 1.5. So that means there's one slot available for every 1.5 children. And cost of childcare has increased over the years, depending on the child's age, but the cost of providing care for infants has increased the most, which we see highlighted here in this graph. At this point, I will turn it over to my colleague, Eliana, who will highlight the current landscape of childcare services. I've been sharing some of what we learned in terms of the historical trends, and Eliana will touch on current state.
Thank you, Monica. We can just jump right in. To provide some background to assess the current childcare landscape, we looked at 5 central elements, which included capacity, which has to do with the slots available according to the Department of Child and Family Services. We looked at provider type, such as you have previously heard, which includes family, home, and center-based providers. We looked at childcare quality based on the Illinois Accelerate ranking system. And as well, we looked at hours of operation and cost, as well as some information on guardian and parent childcare usage and preferences. So we can move to the next slide, and we'll start with capacity. So as of early 2023, 1,273 childcare slots were available across 48 licensed providers in Effingham County. 42 of those providers were identified as serving ages birth through 2. Using a selection of 34 providers representing about 1,004 slots, we modeled the distribution of childcare capacity by age group. From the sample of providers, a total of about 464 slots were identified as serving that birth through 2 range, or 46% of all slots available. The least number of slots in this age range, 14%, were available for that birth through 2 cohort. We can go to the next slide. Now let's look at the distribution of these slots by provider type. Most providers, 66.7% in Effingham County, are family childcare home providers, yet these providers are lower capacities, making them account for only 19% of the available slots. Meanwhile, childcare centers account for only 20.8% of providers, yet account for 66% of childcare slots in the county. So we're seeing a bit of a reverse situation in terms of the number of providers versus their capacities. School and employer-based childcare are the minority in terms of both providers and childcare slots, with only 1 employer and 5 school-based options identified within the county. The single employer-based center, Topmate Central, which opened in late 2022, added 98 full-time childcare slots, meaning the single provider now accounts for 8% of the total childcare in the county. You can go to the next slide. Now that we understand a bit more about the types of providers in the county, we can look at their quality. A majority of the childcare providers in Effingham County, 82.6%, have a licensed rank in the Illinois Accelerate ranking system. This indicates that a provider has met the standards to receive and is maintaining a license from the Illinois Department of Child and Family Services. Higher rankings such as silver, bronze, and gold indicate that a provider has undergone further checks and balances. You can see some of these examples on the slide, so I won't go into too much detail. Currently, 6.5% of the providers in the county rank as bronze and 4.3% rank as silver. No providers have a high or gold quality ranking in the system, which indicates the most rigorous parameters for accountability, training, and improvement. Additionally, 6.5% of providers were license exempt, which indicates these providers are not required to hold licensing and thus are not really accounted for in the Accelerate ranking system at this time. Let's see. So we can move on to childcare availability during the work week. 95.8% of childcare providers in the county are licensed to provide exclusively daycare services. This means that the majority of the hours children spend in these care facilities are between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. In line with this, during the work week, 95.1% of providers indicate opening between 5 and about 9 a.m. 5 and 9 a.m. 92.7% close before 7 p.m. In the provided charts, you can see further breakdowns of these hours of operation in a bit more detail. Additionally, despite 36.7% of 2021 community childcare survey respondents indicating working non-standard hours, such as between 5 p.m. and 6 a.m. daily, only 7.3% of providers offer extended care later than 7 p.m., and no providers indicated providing overnight care at this time. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. Let's look at cost now. The average weekly center-based childcare rates are on average $26 to $61 more expensive than those of family home-based providers for children ages 0 through kindergarten, with infants having the largest variation in that cost. So they're towards the $61 end of price differential. By the time children are school age, the weekly average price difference between center and home-based care really becomes negligible, about only $9 in difference. For home-based providers, average weekly rates were more consistent for children birth through kindergarten than those for centers, with infant care being the most expensive regardless of that provider type. Home-based providers also had broader ranges in terms of pricing, with minimum prices being $45 to $65 less than their maximum rates. And center maximum rates and minimum pricing only varied by $20 to $30. So you're going to see more consistent pricing at centers across those age ranges. We can move to the next slide. To look at some usage and preference, in 2021, the Effingham County Community Planning Group conducted a community childcare survey in order to understand the current childcare landscape, as well as guardians' care preferences. These responses represent a sample of roughly 250 guardians in Effingham County. The top 3 most frequently utilized forms of providers, which accounted for all childcare used over a 2-year period, were childcare centers, family home providers, and unlicensed care providers. When we look at the preferred forms of childcare, we can see a difference emerge between actual use and preference of guardians, with childcare centers and family home providers still being the top 2 provider types indicated, but with only 2% of guardians indicating a preference for unlicensed care. Go to the next slide. When the sample of guardians was asked their reason for choosing their current provider, the top 5 reasons indicated were quality, location, hours, cost, and children being happy in the program. As you see, these largely align with the elements we've looked at in the current landscape so far. It's important to note, though, that quality could mean many things to parents other than the Accelerate ranking and child happiness. Despite being an important part of reasoning, child happiness is not necessarily a metric currently accounted for in data being collected. Not that it is easy to quantify child happiness and what that might mean on an individual basis. And then I will pass it back to Monica as we move into looking at these modelings for future demand.
So we have been sharing and highlighting what we learned of childcare availability and trends over the last 10 years, as well as the current state in 2023. And this information and data has been used to inform our final research question, which estimates future demand for childcare services in the county. And to model potential demand, we included a number of factors, including the number of children ages 5 and under, as well as projections from the Illinois Department of Public Health. We also included an estimate for commuters with children. Earlier, we shared just the prevalence of commuters and workers coming into Effingham County from surrounding counties. And we think it's important to include an estimate of how many of those commuters might potentially seek care for their children in Effingham. And according to census data, between 14 to 17% of the workers who live in surrounding counties who commute into Effingham have children under 6. And although we do not know how many of those workers would want care within Effingham, we have a sense from just some broader research that has been conducted by Illinois Action for Children and others of preferences. And so using this knowledge, we use a conservative estimate of 10% of commuters with children who would seek care in the county. And another factor that's important to include in this model is the number of children with working parents. And this indicator really does represent a broad measure of childcare demand. We know that not all children in working families need licensed childcare. Some may be cared by family members, nannies, friends, or in unlicensed care. And finally, we incorporate the recent trends in childcare slots available. So to start out, we modeled different scenarios based on a few assumptions. So the baseline scenario is highlighted here. And in this baseline scenario, we assume that the number of children with working parents and the number of net commuters will follow the historical trends that we've seen over the last 10 years. We also assume that the number of childcare slots available will continue to decrease following historical trends. And we included in our model that approximately 25 slots per year will be lost. That's a yearly rate of about 1.5%. Again, this is the historical trend and is used for this baseline scenario. So those are our assumptions, and based on this baseline scenario, the total unmet need for care for children with working parents is about 725 by 2025, and that rises to about 748 by 2028. We also examined a low demand scenario, and in this scenario, we assume that the number of children with working parents will fall below the historical trends. We also assume that net commuters with children do not seek childcare in Effingham County. And so using these assumptions and modeling the scenario, the total unmet need for childcare for children with working parents is about 711 by 2025 and 723 by 2028. Our high demand scenario incorporates the projected workforce growth. So earlier we shared that in a recent analysis by the Alliance, we estimate that jobs are expected to increase by 5.6% by 2025, and greater job opportunities in the county may lead to a greater number of working parents and thus a greater demand for childcare. And so in this scenario, the total unmet need for childcare among working parents increases by about 137 by 2025 and continues to increase by 2028 to almost 1,000, so 988. Our final scenario is examines a future where Effingham County loses many more providers than anticipated. And in this scenario, we assume that the number of childcare slots available decreases by approximately 100 slots or 8% by 2025. And this is roughly one licensed center. So we're assuming an extreme scenario here. And following that, following a baseline yearly trend of negative 1.2%. So in this extreme scenario, the total unmet need for childcare for children with working parents is 941 by 2025, and it rises to over 1,000 by 2028. Putting it all together here, we see in this visual the demand scenarios for children with working parents in Effingham County from 2021 through 2028. And as we share the baseline scenario, the demand for care exceeds capacity by approximately 750 slots. And under the high demand scenario, that continues to increase. And in the extreme scenario where 100 slots are lost, the total unmet need for care rises to over 1,000 by 2028. Great. Well, thank you so much. I will turn it back to Courtney at this point.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. My goodness, that was a wonderful presentation. Definitely a lot to unload. You guys have ran through both goals, multiple scenarios, and looking at projected growth. And thank you for guiding us through the findings for that feasibility study and the and eloquently reporting on what those intricate details were. Would like to remind everybody that a copy of the recording of this presentation will be made provided to those that did register for today's event, and then we will have it on our YouTube channel, and then a copy of the slides, the presentation here will be provided, plus with the supplementary materials. If you have any questions, do throw them in the chat. We have hit the Q&A session for this. We are coming up on time, but I think we have time for a few questions, and we have one now from Grace. Even with conservative estimate, it looks like Effingham would need about 700 slots. What are planning groups and childcare advocates planning to do to meet this demand? So Grace, to answer that one, the Effingham County Childcare Research Committee took a deep dive into trying to identify those underlying issues here in Effingham County as it pertains to childcare and that hurdle to workforce development, and then which has led us to trying to quantify what that future and existing need is, and to seek professional services, and as you've seen here today with EduDream and guidance through that process. So definitely need to digest this a little bit more. We have developed 3 different programs with the Effingham County and the county board had approved, and that are currently open to where we had a stabilization grant, which was to effectively stop the bleeding. And as EduDream presented, and from our research, there's been a downward trend in the availability of childcare slots here in Effingham County, and not just the availability, but the number of workers that are in that industry. And definitely COVID, the pandemic, if you will, was gasoline on the fire and accelerated that downward trend. And so the stabilization grant was a one-time economic injection into that industry to try to retain what our existing capacity was and prevent or to stop or lessen that downward trend. And then we have the increased capacity, which is a classes that have been offered in strategic business planning for those that are interested in entering this field, either as an in-home or as a childcare facility, to be able to work through a business planning process. And then also existing childcare providers, both in-home and facility, if they want to improve upon their processes or potentially expand, or maybe an in-home to develop out into a center. And then at the backside of completing that course and effectively putting that strategic plan together, a grant opportunity to help initiate those plans offered through the county board. And then we have the childcare scholarship that is currently open, that is offered to those residents that due to income levels are unable to qualify for CCAP, that state assistance for childcare programs. They're just right above that threshold, but still struggling to either find childcare services or to be able to afford childcare services, that there's some type of hindrance for them entering the workforce or staying in the workforce. And the availability to help support those residents at that level of need, and to get them to remain in the workforce or to be able to re-enter the workforce and continue on to help grow our community. But it can't stop there. Definitely additional items are needed. We're going to utilize the findings from this research, from this feasibility study, to help guide the future programming, to help guide the future attack, if you will, to addressing these issues. And so definitely ask anybody that is interested in these issues, please come join us. We can't do this alone, and we definitely want to introduce innovation, want to get input from everybody that's throughout this community. I mean, there's one thing about childcare is that it affects everybody. You may not have children of your own, but I'm sure you know somebody, or you have a family member or neighbors or friends or your coworker that has the need for childcare services. And the childcare industry, we noted earlier, is the workforce behind the workforce, in that it helps and supports and enables the local labor pool to be able to go to work, to be able to do the things that we need to do as a community and to continue to grow. So I'm jabbing on here. We have additional questions in the chat. Risa here, can you describe barriers for new childcare centers? Can you elaborate on sustainable strategies to avoid the downtick as described in the last 10 years affecting childcare availability? Monica, is that something you can touch on?
Do you have a range of requirements that they need to undergo to be able to provide care for children? And once going through those requirements and having individual classrooms, right, to offer the care, there's really strict requirements in terms of the ratio of number of children in the room to the adult, right, the early childhood educator. And I believe the ratio is 1 to 10 for the youngest, so infants and toddlers. And if it extends beyond the 10, then there's an additional individual adult that needs to be in the room as well, either an assistant or another educator. And so these all requirements obviously are necessary to ensure that children are safe, but because of that, then you do require additional workers, right? And so we know that there's a shortage across the country, not just in early childhood, also in K-12, but specifically in early childhood, there's a extreme shortage of workers, and educators are leaving the workforce for a number of reasons. It's gotten even worse during the pandemic. We know that early childhood educators are the least compensated when it comes to salary and wages, and huge disparity compared to teachers in elementary or just in K-12. And so again, there's also requirements and training that early childhood teachers need to go through. And so it's very complex, and all of this does impact the ability of centers to be able to offer the slots, right, and be able to provide that care. So those are a number of issues, but Courtney or others, if you'd like to add as well, based on your work with providers.
Well, based on our work with providers and maybe even a little earlier in the answering of that question and elaborating that more, and what you had in this presentation that is quite shocking. Looking at Effingham County, the female with children under 6, you know, the demographic group of ages 20 to 64, but specifically those female with children under ages 6, that labor force participation rate has significantly declined from 2015 to 2021. But and that noted, I wrote down 87% in 15 and all the way down to 70% in 2021. And but in surrounding communities, in the surrounding counties, has increased. And maybe as a continuation of that question, or just a little additional inputs or insight from you guys, is that household behavior. What is causing that downward trend? I mean, we most certainly can speak to other correlations through the through your research and the findings here with the gap in CCAP and the downward trend of available childcare slots. But anything really stick out or pointing to the reason why females with children under the age of 6 have effectively exited the workforce?
That could be driving that. For one, the excuse me, I'm having a brain freeze for at the moment. But typically, as we highlighted in the presentation earlier, that downward trend we're seeing in working families that are either two-parent households or single-parent households, and so one parent is leaving the workforce. And we also highlighted in our findings that the cost of care has increased over the years, not just in Effingham County, but just across the country as well. And so wages are not increasing at the same rate as the cost of care is. And so families are really needing to make difficult decisions about entering the workforce, and really just that cost benefit. Does it make sense for one earner to stay home with the child in those early years, because just the salary is just effectively either all 100% going to care or not sufficient. And so there's those trade-offs that are happening that we feel families are making. That can be one factor. Another factor, if there's not sufficient care available, we saw that care in licensed centers has decreased over the years. Families, there's waiting lists from your own work, and with the Childcare Research Committee, you've found that providers are reporting really long wait lists for families seeking care. And so if you can't find care, then again, that's contributing to decisions that are being made about staying home and not being able to find care, or trying to, and especially for working families that might, their hours that they work may not be traditional hours. They might work in the evenings. And Eliana highlighted earlier that there's just not, licensed care centers are open during the day at traditional hours, right? 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And so for families that do have employment sort of in those odd, non-traditional working hours, again, there's less availability. So there's a number of factors that could be explaining what we're seeing. We don't know in terms of the surrounding communities, what we're seeing there, that they're not being as impacted as Effingham is in terms of labor force participation. So that may be an area to explore a little further to try to understand.
And I would suggest it's probably a trend in other communities as well. Now, the degree of what that impact most certainly can negate from community to community. But, you just maybe a little continuation, and we've got about 5 minutes left. There are a couple other questions. So quickly, you spoke about the gap. So ages 0 to 2 at a 59% gap of those utilizing CCAP from the eligible that would be eligible, and a 72% gap for the ages of 3 to 5. It just and then we talk about the downward trend of as you just noted, to the availability of workforce and potentially the cost associated to what childcare services is versus what you're making in a wage. I mean, a lot of components come into it, but the seeing that over half for 0 to 2 and 3 to 5 at almost 3/4. Is it an educational thing? Is there any specific reasons or any guidance you can have us to better utilize these resources that are made available and may help turn some of these downward trends? So go ahead.
That you all with the Child Care Committee are really doing to try to bring more options to families is really important. We highlighted a couple of the new centers that are opening and kind of really working collectively to try to improve options for families. And I would also recommend just understanding more around preferences and what families within the community are experiencing. I see a comment in the chat around families having trouble finding care for their children with special needs. So again, just really trying to target where is the biggest gap within what we're seeing in the data and in the raw data, and trying to unpack that a bit more by speaking to those in the community with children to try to develop more targeted solutions there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And not a question, but a comment from Sean from Ready Nation. Just it's an outstanding collection of data here, and another testament of the great work that you're all doing at Effingham County, which I would extend to EduDream, not just us here in Effingham County, but our strategic partners and Illinois Action for Children as well, to tackle local childcare challenges, and just noting that this is important to working families, their employers, and the regional economy and the quality of life as a whole. And you had noted a little bit on Amy's comment in the chat as well, with the that several parents that they have talked to are having trouble finding care for those children with special needs, and the downsizing of households in order to take care of these children. It is most certainly an issue that needs to be present during these conversations. Jenna had asked the question of if we have looked at or into the need for school age children as part of this, or if the focus was just 5 and under. And Jenna, for the confines of the feasibility study, we did have to put some limitations on it due to time and resources available, and strictly went to birth to up to school age in our findings. But the discussion moving forward definitely in the past has been towards school age children as well, but needs to continue to be there. And so I've again, if anybody is interested in continuing the discussion into trying to formalize possible solutions to overcome some of these workforce related hurdles as it pertains to childcare, please join us with the PAVE Childcare Action Team. If you send us a quick email, you can always reach out by phone. You can connect to us. We do have an email dedicated for PAVE, which is that provided a vision for Effingham County. Hey, there you go. Thank you kindly. Our phone number there, 217-342-4214. You've got my email address. You've got John's email address on there as well. But one that we have for PAVE, it's the EFFCO PAVE, EFFCOPAVE @gmail.com, and we'll get you set up and let you know when the meetings are and get you involved. I mean, the saying, it takes a village, and I mean, it takes the community, it takes everybody to continue to address these issues, to build upon the quality of life that we have, to overcome these workforce related hurdles, and the barriers don't stop just right at our county border. We approach things on a regional effort as well, and want to continue those partnerships. Risa, and I'll quickly try to sum up the last few of these questions will end that we've hit the 11 o'clock hour here, but had asked, how will your program sustain in the program in the future? So the existing programs that we have open through the county board, funding has been allocated to those. They are and will run through completion for that. Moving forward, as noted, the public-private partnership that we have through PAVE in addressing issues and future policies or programs, I think is definitely has to be attacked from both a public and private side. I mean, a true partnership, if you will, with participation, not just from public funds, but participation from our local businesses, our local community as well, and to in that these issues affect everybody, and looking at who could benefit from overcoming these workforce related hurdles. They definitely need our local businesses, our local community leaders both need to be involved in these conversations, and to try to provide resources, not always monetary, but resources, and moving forward to address the issues. And we have additional questions here. Dan just put good information and helpful to determine the real need and opportunity for children and their parents. So, and then Megan said, thanks for the great presentation. We've hit 2 minutes past the 1 hour time frames, and we'll end it at that. Again, a heartfelt thank you to the EduDream team for working through us through this process. It's definitely been a journey. It wasn't a sprint in helping us overcome the hurdles that we were experiencing and trying to obtain some of the data for this and really being professional through it and guiding us through this. This is a tremendous report that you've put together. It helps us continue the ongoing discussion that we have, and that allows us to help make educated decisions in moving forward. And I'm very appreciative of all the work, very appreciative of Illinois Action for Children and partnering with us through this. And if not for them, we wouldn't have been able to do this feasibility study. So very thankful for them as well. We hope that you continue to join us. If you are interested, again, in joining the PAVE Childcare Action Team, EFFCopave@gmail.com. And again, I can't say it enough. Thank you to the EduDream team for all you've done. And we look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Hope everybody enjoyed today's presentation and found it informative and continues to work with us as we make Effingham County a better place for everyone. Have a good day.